Permissions 101. Let's connect to the SSH before doing anything. And we say SSH try hack me at the IP 10.10.183.68. Then here we say yes. And we say again, try hack me. Now, after we have the connection and it's done, let's say a clear. And let's go. As you would have already found out by now, certain users cannot access certain files or folders. We've previously explored some commands that can be used to determine what access we have and where it leads us. In our previous tasks, we learned how to extend the use of commands through flags and switches. Take, for example, the list command, which lists the contents of the current directory. When using the -L switch, we can see 10 columns such as in the screenshot below. Let's do the same. We'll say ls with the flag L. Right, let's go. Here we have the permissions that any user has. Users, then I think it's groups users or users groups, dates, and then names. But let's see, let's go on, let's read. However, we're only interested in the first 3 columns. 1, 2, and 3. The rights a user has on a certain file. Although intimidating, these 3 commands are these 3 columns are very important in determining certain characteristics of a file or a folder and whether or not we have access to it. A file or a folder can have a couple of characteristics that determine both what actions are allowed and what user or a group has the ability to perform the given action, such as the following: read, write, and execute. Read is R, W is write, and X is execute. Using SU to switch to user 2. So switch user 2, password. It asks for a password, and then we are user 2 in the same machine. Let's use the cmna tic.pam file in our initial screenshot. At the top of this task, it has the dash indicator highlighting that it is a file and then RW followed after. This means that only the owner of the file can read and write to this file, but cannot execute it. Okay. Briefly, the differences between users and groups. We briefly explored this in Linux Fundamentals Part 1, namely, the differences between a regular user and a system user. The great thing about Linux is that permissions can be so granular that while a user technically owns a file, if the permissions have been set, then a group of users can also have either the same or a different set of permissions to the exact same file without affecting the file owner itself. Let's put this into a real-world context. The system user that runs a web server must have permissions to read and write files for an effective web application. However, companies such as web hosting companies will have to want to allow their customers to upload their own files for their website without being the web server system user, compromising the security of every other customer. We learned the commands necessary to switch between users below. Switching between users on a Linux install is easy work thanks to SU command. Unless you are the root user or using root permissions through sudo, then you are required to know 2 things to facilitate this transition of user accounts. The user we wish to switch to, the user's password. The SU command takes a couple of switches that may be of relevance to you. For example, executing a command once you log in or specifying a specific shell to use. I encourage you to read the manual page for SU to find out more. However, I will cover the -L or -- login switch. Simply by providing the the -L switch to SU, we start a shell that is much more similar to the actual user login into the system. We inherit a lot more properties of the new user, that is environment variables and the likes. For example, when using SU to switch to user 2, our new session drops us into our previous user's home directory. Where now after using -L, our new session has dropped us into the home directory of user automatically. Yeah, so we can see it here. SU user 2, so switch user to user 2 asks for password. And after we successfully introduce the password of user 2, we see that we are in the home directory and the previous user. But if we switch the user with the -L with the same user, password introduced and is correct, we print the working directory, we are under the current user home page, home directory. Answer the questions below. On the deployable machine, who is the owner of important? Let's do an ls-list. And we see here, as I said, groups and users, or users and groups, I think. We see user 2. What would the command be to switch to user 2? Switch user 2. Now switch to this user using the password user 2, switch user 2. Actually, let's say hit Ctrl C to go back there. Switch user, I want to use it with the -L because I want to be inside his, even though it's not asked for this task. I just presume that we will need that. Let me see, list. Let's go back. Output the contents of important. Let's go find by a name important. We see it under, let's go try hack me important. We see it over here. Bam. Awesome.